Welcome to Decision 2020, the U.S. House of Representatives Candidate Forum. This is an opportunity for voters to hear directly from the candidates. Today, we turn our attention to the U.S. House of Representatives race in Michigan's 2nd Congressional District, where Republican incumbent U.S. Representative Bill Huizenga faces Democratic challenger Reverend Bryan Berghoef, Libertarian Riekse, and Green Party candidate Jean-Michel Creviere. Taxpayer Party candidate Gerald Van Sickle has politely declined our invitation. Today's forum was recorded Tuesday, October 13th, from the studios of the Meijer Public Broadcast Center at Grand Valley State University. Now, let us begin by introducing Republican incumbent U.S. Representative Bill Huizenga. Bill, thank you so much for joining us.
Patrick, pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having us.
For those unfamiliar with yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and why serving in Congress is important to you.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a family that was divided, frankly, politically. Mom was a good Irish Catholic girl from Flint. My dad was a good Dutch CRC boy from R-Zeeland. As you can imagine, we had some robust conversations at the dinner table. And it gave me a great perspective, really understanding that, and I think this is maybe an especially important lesson in these times, you can actually disagree with somebody yet still sit across the dinner table from them and actually love them yet, right? But I watched my dad and my mom both serve our community for many years in different ways. But one of the ways that my dad did was he was a Zeeland City Councilman for over 3 decades. He went on to serve as a county commissioner as well. And both my mom and my dad really drilled it into us as kids that you need to just give back to your community. You can't be just a citizen really without participating in it. And that can take a lot of different forms. Flash forward, I ended up graduating from Calvin College with a political science degree, which of course meant I went into something other than politics. I was in real estate and construction. My family has been in construction for 3 generations. And then I had an opportunity to go to work for my predecessor, Peter Hoekstra, as his district director. And I spent 6 years on staff with Pete, really getting a chance to dive deep into West Michigan and what makes this place such a unique place. Then I spent 6 years in the state legislature. But during that time, I ended up buying out my dad's part of the family business, the family construction business. And throughout all of that, and now with this current position, having one foot firmly planted in the public policy world and one foot firmly planted in the real world of the economy has been just so amazingly helpful to understand what it means when we do tax reform, what it means when we're talking about healthcare, what it means when we are looking at the effects of the economy and the courts that might have on the economy or regulation might have on the economy. So, I think I'm very uniquely situated here to have both a public policy understanding as well as a real world business understanding of what our community needs.
The coronavirus pandemic is a public health crisis that has killed more than 210,000 Americans so far this year. It's impacting the economy, education, and society at large. In Congress, what steps are you taking or would promote to stem the spread of the disease and support the economy and schools?
Yeah, well, and we have to take one slight step back to look at the context. And of course, any death coming from this is one too many. I do remember sitting on the House floor having bipartisan conversations about expectations and projections. And there was projections of literally 2 million people not being infected, but dying from coronavirus, meaning potentially 100 million of our citizens getting it. Thankfully, that hasn't been the case. And we were woefully behind on PPE, that personal protective equipment, because we had literally given up the supply chain over the last number of decades. And we needed to reclaim that. And there was one country in particular that not only delivered coronavirus, it also had all the equipment to help fight and protect people from coronavirus, and that was China. So, if you look at some of those first early bills before we get to the CARES Act, which was this $3 trillion overall package. Before we get to the CARES Act, there was a number of things that we did to make sure that NIH, CDC, all this alphabet soup of all the federal agencies that were geared to fighting this, that they had some additional resources, and we need to continue that. We need to make sure that that structure is there for the research. We need to make sure that we are reclaiming those supply chains from not just China, but other places around the world, so that we aren't dependent on another country for ventilators or masks or what certainly are drugs. You look at the pharmaceutical side of this. It has been something that has been claimed by other parts of the world, especially China and India, over the last decade or so. So that's what I'm hoping to continue to do. Now, when we talk about the funding side, that support side, we have $138 billion that was allocated for the Paycheck Protection Program, that PPP, that program that was meant and did save many, many small businesses. That is been allocated, as I said, but has not been spent because the program has expired. Unfortunately, Speaker Pelosi has decided to play political games with this, has refused to look at support for those small restaurants, those small concert venues, refused to look at support for the airlines, the industries that have been so directly affected by COVID and that governmental shutdown that happened at the local, state, and federal level. I think that's a tragedy. Instead, she's passed these strictly along partisan lines, these massive $3 trillion bills and packages of bills that are stuffed with every pet policy and every pet project that you can think of under the sun. And what we need to do is make sure that any relief package to state and local governments isn't simply just going to be a bailout for the California pension funds or the Illinois pension funds or the New York state and local governments that have made bad decisions. Here in Michigan, we have a constitutional requirement, a state constitutional requirement for a balanced budget every year. I sat in Lansing for 6 years making those very difficult decisions. And those states don't have those same requirements. And so why would the citizens of Michigan just simply throw money at a California or a New York problem? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. We do need to get some additional dollars into the schools, for example. My state legislative friends tell me, though, that the school aid fund is doing far better than what they had anticipated. But that's because the economy is doing far better than people had anticipated. In other words, that recovery has been very quick, not fully complete yet, but it has been a very quick response. And we need to make sure, Patrick, that we are supporting those things, those governmental policies and decisions that are going to help continue that snapback in the economy. Because that's key for locals, for state, and for federal government to make sure that revenue, that tax revenue from economic activity is coming back. That could be the best thing that we could do. In the meantime, we are going to have to build some bridges of support, though.
Just to let you know, we have about 6 minutes. So here we go with the next question. With the pandemic impacting Americans' activities, what action should be taken ensuring that the presidential election is free, fair, and secure?
Well, so obviously here in Michigan, we have a system of absentee ballots that is quite secure. That is, in fact, I've been working with my own kids on this, who are college age, who have been able to get their absentee ballots. We have a different situation here in Michigan than there are in like New Jersey and some other places where they're literally sending live ballots out to people. That's a horrible idea. That is truly a recipe for a problem. Very different than what we have here in Michigan. So we need to make sure that those ballots are available, that they are sent out in a timely manner and are returned in a timely manner. I do believe that this 14-day court mandated window is ridiculous. This is not going to be healthy if we cannot determine an election outcome for 14 days after election day. That doesn't make sense to me. But we need to make sure that those ballots are coming back in. That means there needs to be an option for people to drop off their ballots and be able to go and vote in person on the day of the election. And every plan that I've seen has that contingency, and it looks like I think it's going to be coming off just fine.
The Affordable Care Act has been long debated. What is the correct course for providing Americans with health care? Do you believe people with pre-existing conditions should be protected?
Yeah, let's start there. Absolutely. There was a couple of things in the ACA, quote unquote, Obamacare that I wholeheartedly agreed with. And it started with pre-existing conditions, making sure that someone who was afflicted with cancer or someone who had a defect that they may have even been born with, a heart defect or something like that, they weren't excluded from that coverage. I wanted to make sure that it was portable. And here was some very commonly accepted goals of this: better care at a lower cost to more people. And the question that I wrestled with is, did the so-called Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, do that? Well, we know it did not lower costs. It did get some additional coverage to people, not everybody, but to some folks. And then the question is did it give better care? And I would argue this goes back to the whole, if you want to keep your doctor and you keep your insurance plan, you can keep it, which clearly wasn't the case. So I believe that the ACA or Obamacare was the wrong answer to the right questions of what we have been doing. House Republicans actually have passed a bill, and I know there's lots of discussions about you guys don't have a plan. That's actually not true. We have a group of doctors that had put together a working group a couple of elections ago, or a couple of Congresses ago, and they have presented those. What I am frustrated with is that we did not culminate that with a vote while we were in the majority, and certainly now Nancy Pelosi and the House Democrats are not taking up that bill any stretch of the imagination. So we must cover, and whatever happens, and I have voted for this time and time and time again, we need to make sure that pre-existing conditions are covered. We need to make sure that those that have access now continue to have that access. What we need to do is figure out ways to lower those costs. And President Trump has actually been going after the drug companies on this, trying to force down drug prices. We need to look and make sure that we have legal reform. The cover your rear medical prescriptions are not how we keep those medical costs down. Doing preventative is very different than doing defensive medicine.
All right, well, quickly here, we have about a minute and a half. President Donald Trump has made a point of renegotiating trade deals. Some of the negotiating tactics include enacting tariffs. In your opinion, is the overall plan working? What job creation strategy or strategies would you like to see enacted?
Yeah, well, the proof is in the pudding. When the president announced that he was going to renegotiate NAFTA, by the way, he would be the third president who said that he was going to do that, including Bill Clinton, who signed it into law. And none of them did it. He got laughed at. And at the end of the day, the result is now the USMCA, United States, Mexico, Canada agreement. That is literally proof of what he was willing to do. And I'll be honest, I was critical of some of those tariffs. I was very concerned that they would not work. They wouldn't bring people to the table. And in some cases, it hasn't worked out perfectly. In other cases, you know what? It did exactly what it was meant to do. Same thing with China. Now what I wish we had done, and what I would have done maybe a little differently, is not made a multi-front trade skirmish happen with the Europeans, the Chinese, and the Canadians and Mexicans, Mexican governments. It should have been maybe one at a time, but the proof is in the pudding on that.
How will you address racial injustice and police brutality?
Well, obviously we have some bad apples, and those bad apples must be dealt with to the extent of the law. You can't have those stories of old where police departments and police chiefs would be covering up for the bad cops. And I got to tell you, after George Floyd happened, I had a lot of conversations with patrol officers, with chiefs and sheriffs, and in fact, here in the second district, we've got both Republican and Democrat elected sheriffs, and having those conversations, like with the Muskegon Heights chief of police, who actually just took a job over on the east side of the state, and asking them what's happening within the community. It seems to me it comes down to community relations. It really is about integrating those police departments into the communities and having the community be a part of it and be a part of the solution of what's going on. Defunding it does not accomplish that goal. Defunding those police departments doesn't do it. We do need to make sure that we have equal application of the law, which is why I think if you look at what President Trump has done with sentencing reform, which was a massively bipartisan issue in the House of Representatives and the Senate, he was able to get it done. It's about making sure that there is, again, that equal application, but also I think the equal enforcement of the law. And Patrick, how do we heal racial issues from our history? How do we have that reconciliation? That's been a question that we've wrestled with as a society for not decades, but literally since before the Civil War. Looking at the founding of our country, when we've struggled with that, it has certainly come more to the forefront here in the last year or so. What I'm fearful of is people using this to just simply score political points or try to use it to score political points, and whether it is in a Hispanic community, whether it's in an African American community, whether it's in the Asian community, we need to have dialogue that is happening in our communities to make sure that everyone is being understood, everyone is being heard, and everyone is having their opportunity to be involved.
From cyber interference in democratic elections to the proliferation of nuclear weapons, what defense and national security measures are necessary for dealing with emboldened world leaders and terrorists who are targeting the United States?
Yeah, all of them. We need all of that. You look at the number of cyber attacks that are happening, not on a daily or hourly or even minute basis. It's millions of them per second. If you look at what's happening in the federal government, state government, local governments, our businesses and industries, everything from power plants to our banking system, are constantly under assault from cyber attack. So we have got to get better at doing that. We've got to make sure that we're able to maintain our privacy, that personal, they call it PII, that personal individual identifications that are out there. That is vital. Now, interestingly enough, we voluntarily give this information up oftentimes to social networks, right? And then we feel violated when rightfully so, it gets released somehow. And we've all, as consumers of this, have to get better and wiser about how we are releasing and using that information for the personal side. You look at the larger question of our national defense. We need to have a strong, robust military, and that includes every weapon system that we have, from the new Gerald R. Ford class carriers that are steaming around the world, to missile technology, to defense technology. That is a reality of what our world is, as we've seen an aggressive Russia, an aggressive China. You see what China has done in the off the coast of the Philippines and what they would claim as the South China Sea. You look at what they've done in Hong Kong, for example. You look at what North Korea has done as it's tormented Japan. with missile launches and things like that. So we need to look at missile defense systems. That is constitutionally even one of the primary focuses and jobs of the federal government is that national security.
Well, you're there, so I'm going to ask you, how are you dealing with special interest groups and their influence on policy in Washington?
Unpack that a little bit. What exactly do you mean?
Like lobbyists, that type of things.
So, well, obviously, my first and foremost concern is what do the people of the second district think? Now, some of them are parts of organizations like the Realtors or the Firefighters Association, or the myriad of associations that we're all a part of. Imagine there's some sort of broadcasters. I know there is for the station, right? I mean, the station has come out and talked to me about policy at various times. So that's really what we have to look at, is making sure that the focus is on the needs of the district, the needs of the constituents within the district, and there's various ways that those folks express that. Sometimes it's with the policy, sometimes it's with campaigns. And I was when I graduated with my political science degree, I went into real estate full time. And as a newly minted realtor, I think I wrote a $50 check to the RPAC, the Realtors PAC. And that $50 check then came together with hundreds, if not thousands of others from across the state of Michigan that then supported candidates that knew what it meant to have good policy to promote housing. So that is a key part of this. And we oftentimes forget what this really means, to have the support of a PAC and who is behind that. And you've got PACs that support social issues. It could be a right to life, or it could be, NARAL. It could be the unions have them. In fact, the only group that is legally barred from having a direct PAC is corporations. Employees have them, but not actual corporations. So you got to have this balance of making sure that you are listening to everybody, you're understanding what the needs of the constituency in the district are, and then you have to use your own good judgment. And frankly, I've lost political support because of my judgment. There is a large airplane manufacturer that shall remain nameless, that didn't like my policy thoughts on the Export-Import Bank. So they literally cut off all support. That's okay. That's their choice. And I had to make the choice about whether the policy was the right policy for the country or not.
Do you or don't you believe that humans are significantly contributing to climate change?
Oh, I think that's undeniable. Obviously, we are a part of this. From our power plants to our vehicles to the other methane producing, through our food systems and food supply. It seems though it oftentimes gets forgotten though that where nature's part of this also is. But beyond that, I think the real question is, are we going to help force countries like India and like China to make better decisions with their own environment, which frankly affects our world as well? Or are we just going to go out on our own? And that's where I see a lot of the debate happening is I want to have those other countries that are responsible for this being more involved and engaged, and not just have it rest on the shoulders of the U.S. taxpayer.
West Michigan is known for its natural resources. Are there additional protections that you believe are needed protecting our waters, our forests, and our farmlands?
Well, I've done a lot of work on the Great Lakes. I'm the co-chair of the Great Lakes Task Force, for example. I was one of the founding members of the PFAS task force that's been looking at the pollution and the poisoning that has been going on. I've been fighting for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. There had been, people forget that in the early Obama years, there was an attempt to cut that, which is kind of stunning. A senator from Illinois who allowed that to happen, and we've been building that back. And in fact, this year with the Trump administration adding additional dollars to it, It's been an easier and easier sell because of the results, and that's really what we have to show is what are those results for those dollars that are going in. Absolutely, we've got to make sure that we are preserving what makes West Michigan so special, right? And that includes not just our water, but our air. But if we jump back a few years ago, Michigan was getting penalized for air pollution that was coming out of Gary, Indiana, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and it was drifting across the Great Lakes. But guess who was getting slapped with some very serious consequences on that? It was West Michigan, and all of our manufacturers, for example, here in West Michigan, were saying, "Wait a minute, we didn't produce this. Why are we paying this price, limiting our ability to go out and do what we need to do?" So we have to have some common sense in this. We have to have some balance in this. I'm a conservationist from the hunting side. I love to go duck hunting. There's nothing like a duck marsh in sunrise. Can't get Mrs. Huizenga to join me on that. It's a little early, but it's something special of what we have here, and all of us, integrate in one way or the other water around in our lives, especially in those summer months here in West Michigan.
I don't know that I can picture you in the Elmer Fudd hat, but
Duck season.
If it's really cold, I do have a camo one.
Under what dire circumstance or government necessity would you be willing to support a tax increase?
I think if there was a direct attack on the nation, I would equate it to like war bonds, right? I would go there first. But if we needed to look at what our nation was under attack on, we would have to be very, very careful about that. But other than that circumstance, I can't think of anything without addressing our spending. It really is about prioritization. We've got to look at spending. And I believe that economic activity is the key to that revenue side. So we all too often are looking at the spending side and not the revenue side, and we've got to make sure that we've got that in balance. And we don't right now. We frankly do not. And let me take this opportunity. I'm part of a group that, for lack of a better phrase or a better name, we call ourselves the 30 by 30 group, and it's 30 Republicans and 30 Democrats that have come together. We come together on a regular basis, and we have actually had some tangible results in trying to get our leadership on both sides, including at the White House and at the Senate, to listen to our concerns about our debt load right now here as a country. We're approaching 23 trillion with a T, trillion dollars in debt. If we ever see interest rates raised, not to highs, just to our historic norms, we know that servicing the debt is going to be more expensive than all of our defense spending, all of our domestic spending. That means there's less money for schools and for roads and for national defense. And we're putting ourselves in a horrible, horrible situation here. And we've got to do better and have a serious conversation about what we're going to do on the spending side, on the revenue side, and then how we're going to restore that balance.
There are economists who are concerned about the growing wealth disparity as a threat to the country's future economic growth and prosperity. Do you concur, disagree? Explain your feelings on this.
I wholeheartedly agree that this is a real issue that needs to be addressed. The question is how do you do that? And it's really about opportunity in many ways. And you look at why the wealthy have been getting more wealthy. All right. And this is something that we deal with on the Financial Services Committee all the time. And it's dealing with IPOs, which is those initial price offerings when a company, a privately held company, decides to go public. All right. Well, we've experienced this phenomena that are called unicorns. These big billion-dollar plus companies that sometimes multi-billion-dollar held companies that are privately held, that are not public. Right. That means if you're 401k, you can't access it. Your pension plan can't access it. You as an individual investor can't access it. 65% of all the households in America are engaged in the stock market in one way, shape, or form or another, either directly or indirectly through their 401ks or their pension plans, through their employers. They are having fewer and fewer opportunities. Meanwhile, the wealthy are the folks that have those additional dollars to invest into these companies, and they're getting massive, massive returns. So the question is why aren't these companies going public? Part of that is because of a huge amount of regulation that has been layered onto that whole system, right? So that is one piece of the puzzle. Another piece of the puzzle, and this is something else that I've been very involved in, is really financial education. Financial wisdom has kind of the what grandma used to do with a nickel has kind of gone right out the window, right? And we have very different expectations, and that's my generation too, and the generations of our kids. We have taken on too much debt personally. We have set very different expectations than what previous generations have been willing to live with. And I get it. Who doesn't want to have it all? But we've got to be more measured in how we are spending that, and we have just built up a massive amount of debt on personal levels, as well as obviously as local governments and other places that have done that. So, then at the end of the day, the best way to give somebody an opportunity is give them a job. We need to have an economically robust economy. There's a lot of discussion about raising the minimum wage, for example. Well, back when we had the oil boom that was happening in the Dakotas before the economy tanked, there was no discussion of raising the minimum wage, because people were making $20 an hour, literally working in a car wash or working at the McDonald's, and it was because there was so much demand and so much economic activity, rather than having the federal government or even a state government come in and mandate somebody to pay a certain wage. We've got to make sure we're creating the environment that allows those wages to go up. And they were right before the crash and the COVID crash. We saw record low unemployment across the board: Hispanic, African-American, female, you name it. We saw wages going up finally, which had been static. And we were rolling in a way that we have not rolled in the modern era economically until suddenly this governmental shutdown. And it was the right thing to do, don't get me wrong. But it seems to me that if government has the power to shut down an economy or a company, it has the responsibility to then open it up as soon as it reasonably can. And it has the responsibility of helping to rebuild that back to where it was, which is one of the reasons why I supported the CARES Act, for example, and the Paycheck Protection Program and some of those programs like that.
You touched on making investments. Do you believe the nation should invest in alternative energy or rely on fossil fuels securing energy independence?
See, here's the thing, Patrick. It can be both. It can be both, and it should be both, and it is both. The second district's actually a perfect example of this. We have coal-fired power plants, which are scheduled to be getting shut down, but we also have gas-fired power plants. We also have the wind turbines that ring Ludington, for example, which then supply power to the pump station, the Ludington pump station, which when electricity is cheap, they pump up water into this big massive reservoir right outside of Ludington. And then within minutes, literally minutes, they can flip a switch and have electricity getting produced on that, which they do oftentimes at peak times when in the summertime, when there's a load from both industry and from people's air conditioners, for example, and that kind of thing. So, oh, by the way, we also have hydro, the Hardy dams, that system, the Croton Dam system. That is, other than nuclear, literally the second district's got everything in it when it comes to the forms of energy, including solar. And I know Grand Valley has been one of the leaders in that with their solar farms. They've been very innovative with CMS Energy in partnering with them. So it needs to be both. The question is, are we going to go with the Green New Deal, right? You know, the Green New Deal, which would be no fossil fuels of any sort, of any kind, which has an estimated cost of $93 trillion over 10 years. So if you divide that out, that's only $9.3 trillion per year, which is, like almost 3 times what the entire federal government budgets and spends, which is also about 2/3 of our entire economic capacity that we have as a country right now. And I think that's the wrong answer to the right questions. Again, you know, we had that with Obamacare being the wrong answer to the right questions. Green New Deal is the wrong answer to the right question. And interestingly enough, I know that there's religious organizations, including the one that one of my opponents is a minister in, who have officially endorsed the Green New Deal as official policy for the denomination. And so, you know, you got a lot of people trying to drag this into to the religious realm as well. So at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we use some common sense, that we are thoughtful on how we are implementing this so that we aren't the only ones doing it. But it needs to be an and, not an either or.
Politics and religion, let's mix it up in the last question, all right? Is there a moral or personal issue you support that is in opposition to your party's ideology? What is it, and why do you strongly adhere to your belief?
So I'll flip it around. One of the reasons why I'm a Republican is because the Republican Party platform supports what I believe are the moral questions of the day, and it starts with life. You know, you've got true evangelical leaders, leaders within the Catholic community that will say the number one issue that we need to deal with in society is the life question. And if you get that question right, a lot of the others fall in place, economics and social justice and all those things. So I'll answer it by flipping it around a little bit. I have policy disagreements with certain aspects of those within my party. What I don't have is a major issue. In fact, I believe it is a lot of my core is reflected in the Republican Party platform on social issues, economic issues, national defense issues. And that's frankly why I am a Republican.
U.S. House of Representatives incumbent Republican Bill Huizenga from R-Zeeland. As always, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks. Appreciate it, Patrick.